Hey there, welcome back to the Support Ops Hangout. This is our weekly podcast that helps you deliver a better support experience to your customers. I'm your host, Chase Clements. On today's show, we're going to look at how transparent a manager should be with their team. What's the line with public-private and all that kind of fun stuff. But before we do that, let's go ahead and introduce our panel. First up, Carolyn's finally back, so we're super excited, and her timing could not be better with this one. So yeah, it's good to have you back.
It's good to be back.
Again, so every now and then we'll throw out like this is why you should watch the YouTube version. You should, because you get to see her uber casual like pose on the couch.
I know. I look super casual right now because the couch faces this way, but the light is over there. So if I look that way, I look like a silhouette. So I'm just lounging here for my book.
Just lounging, that's what we do on this show. It's fine. Next up, Chase Livingston, of course, is still out, so let's preface that. Still doing great with the kid, all that fun stuff. Next up from the regular group, Jeff from over at Wistia. I don't know why I said that wrong, but yeah, Jeff from Wistia. I'm sorry.
Hi,
How
Chase. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
You don't want to like screw up my name or something in return? That would totally be fine.
No, I could never do that to you, Chase.
Oh, and then our special guest for this week, filling in for Chase Livingston, is Diana from. And you told me the name of the company beforehand. It's your freelancing company, and it was Rock Paper Squirrel.
Yes, but you have to do it with a head movement, so it's rock, paper, squirrel.
Again, one reason why you should watch the YouTube so you can see that. Oh, all right. Yeah, thanks for joining us on the show. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's talk transparency. It's kind of all the rage these days. Companies like Buffer, who is kind of our default go-to. That's the example we always give for stuff like this. But other companies like Square, for instance, often highlight how much of a boost transparency has been for their team. Team members not only know what's happening, but they know why something is happening, which can make or break a team. But how much should a manager really share with the rest of their team, especially if you're a new manager? Are there some things best kept private? So that's what we're going to be talking about. And since this is kind of a buffery kind of topic, let's start with Carolyn. So when it comes to you and your team, how much are you sharing with the rest of the team?
And
I say team, I guess we should preface this by saying, obviously you're sharing upwards all the information that you get, but how much are you sharing down from like you down to the rest of the support team?
I would add a caveat to that first part as well.
Yeah, go for it.
I would say I don't share everything upward. Yeah, there's some things that my teammates share with me that I do not necessarily share at all, or sometimes maybe just not all the details of. Since that's not what the show is about, I won't dwell on that, but I just wanted to add that. So yeah, this is kind of a broad one. I'm going to steal Jeff's line and say, it depends. But I mean, I share with my team everything that I know that impacts their work. So I don't know if you want me to start from the beginning in this way, but obviously like product or absolutely anything that I know that's happening in the company or in the product or in the team that is relevant, which is approximately 100% of anything that's happening in the team is relevant because we're still a smallish company. Then I share with them and they share. I mean, we're just a very transparent company. So the one thing that we are not transparent about is like personnel stuff. Feedback, we don't, we give feedback privately. And we did do an experiment where we gave feedback completely transparently. And what we found was that for the most part, people weren't giving feedback because we found it a little bit painful to give it publicly, so people would just not do it. So that's the thing that we've kind of moved to private, which does come with challenges. And I could talk about even a really recent situation that was relevant. But I mean, am I covering everything here by saying like almost everything other than like personalized feedback would be transparent, I would think.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of, not that we're trying to draw a line in the sand, but if we were trying to, I think that's kind of a good breaking point right there. I think it is interesting, though, that some things that other companies would consider private personnel kind of stuff, and the example that pops in my mind is salaries with Buffer. That's one thing that you've chosen to share not only with the team, but share publicly too. So when we're talking about personnel stuff, can you kind of give us a quick and dirty, like, what things are shareable, like salary, and then what's not?
Sure. So salary, we just started to do OKRs, objectives and key results. So we're going to have that be totally transparent, both the list of what you're working on and your scores, like anything that affects the whole team, even though each individual team member is different, salaries, equity, the revenue of the company, like everything, expenses, bank balance, like all that stuff we share, at least internally, transparently, if not, as you say, with the public. What I meant by personnel issues was if somebody's sort of struggling in their role, or personally, or not succeeding or not happy for any reason, like I talked to some of my teammates about some of those things, especially the more senior members, if it's important for them to know, or if they can act on it, or if they could be part of the solution. But the reason I bring that up is because we just had a scenario where somebody wasn't really the right fit for Buffer anymore. Not on my team, but on a different team. And because we had not been doing feedback transparently, because that's a private thing, it came as quite a shock to a lot of people when she was let go. So that's the one challenge of that, is that then, because the people who get feedback, once every week didn't see, and it's more like feed forward, like, mm-hmm. Hey, I noticed this one thing that would be great for you to work on moving forward, not like feedback. But people don't see what other people are getting in terms of feedback, especially like me. They don't see that I get feedback all the time. So when they see somebody's like, oh, then they have no context for that. Like, oh, am I next? Like, what's happening? Why did that happen? So we always do sort of like an explanation after that. We send an email to the team and say, here's why, here's some examples. These are some of the conversations we had with this person. Here are some of the things we tried. But that doesn't really change the fact that a huge percentage of people have the completely normal reaction of like, oh, maybe this is a bigger thing and I could be caught up in this as well. And we don't, at the moment, really have a great solution for that, other than trying to be as honest as possible in the team email afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's all you can do, because, with our Basecamp team, we were in a similar situation. There were 3 or 4 people that left the company all within the span of about a month or so. And that was kind of the feeling. It was like, well, what's going on? Is that, speaking for me personally, I knew it wasn't a like rats jumping off of a sinking ship kind of thing, but you're still like, well, what's wrong? What's coming down the line? Is this going to happen to me? Is this going to happen to like our team? That kind of thing. So having that kind of like, it's not really a follow-up email. It's but it's here's everything that happened with this particular person, and here's why it all played out like it did. Having that kind of helped paint the bigger picture and let us know what was going on, and just kind of reaffirm like the reasons that these people left are isolated to usually just them or the team or whatnot. So it was just it kind of helped, like you said, it made us feel better about the state of where we were. So I think that's a good example there. Dana, you've been at a couple of companies. So when you look at the companies that you've been with, Customer I/O and Desk and so on, how transparent were you as a manager, and were your managers with the rest of the team? Was it something that varied from team to team?
Yes. So Customer I/O was really kind of aimed towards transparency. Previous companies that I've been at really didn't. So there's definitely kind of like a lot of kind of varying responses at different companies. I personally kind of trend towards transparency. I'm a really big fan of it. So I guess like at other companies, I kind of chafed at the non-transparent sort of thing. Like I, as a manager, am transparent. Sometimes a little bit more transparent than some companies have liked me to be. One thing, like as Carolyn said, like personnel issues, just those aren't transparent. Not just feedback, but like if you know something's going on in someone's personal life, you don't talk about that. But one thing like advice that I got when I first became a manager, and like I've always been told as a manager, if there's like decisions that are made and you don't agree with them, but they just kind of have to be done. When you're a manager, you're not supposed to say that. You're just supposed to be as cheerful as possible and tell your team and implement them. And that's always advice that I've hated. So that's advice that I've kind of personally never followed, which isn't that like I'll badmouth the company or anything like that, but I'll be really open with my team as to maybe we don't agree with this. It doesn't matter. We need to just do it. We need to make the best case that we can. We need to, do our jobs as well as we can. We can talk openly as a team as to what's not great about this and then talk to upper management about why it's not great. But I've never really believed in like not being transparent as to I don't like this. I don't think that that's like a great thing for a manager to kind of pretend that you think everything is great and wonderful, because I've had those managers that did that, and then you could always kind of tell that they were sitting there gritting their teeth and telling you that everything was great. And I personally, like as their managee, I guess, was like, no, you don't agree, and I'm not really sure that I quite believe you and other things that you said now. So that's always kind of been my thing. It's always been like being really like honest of like, you know what, everyone, I don't think that this is the best thing. I'll be honest with you, but that doesn't matter. We need to do what's best for our customers. Let's make the best of this. Let's do the best job that we can. Let's go out and, kick some butt and do what we can with that. So that's always kind of been my take on transparency at companies that were either less or like at Customer.io, we could be as transparent as we could. We weren't transparent with salaries or equity or stuff like that, but we were transparent with this is how much we have in the bank, these are expenses, these are, companies' decisions were made like this and stuff like that. It's kind of half buffer, half really non-transparent companies.
Yeah, so to both you and Carolyn, because I think that's interesting that both companies do that. And Jeff, if Wistia does this, you can jump into. Like with Basecamp, Basecamp doesn't share how much money we got in the bank. It doesn't share salaries. It doesn't share we're profitable. We have been for a long time now, and we've got enough money for whatever we need to in the future. But I have no idea like what the balance sheet looks like, and I don't want to know. It just doesn't really concern me. So for you two, do you think that the team gets anything out of that transparency, or is it just kind of like, well, there's no reason for us to hide it internally, so we're just going to default to sharing it?
I personally love transparency. So like I can go back and forth on things like buffer making salaries transparent. Like I could argue both sides. I'm not sure I'd love my salary being transparent to the world, but I'd love my salary being transparent internally in the company. Like I think that I could get on a soapbox about pay inequality and why it should be transparent that way. But like I worked for companies during the dot-com bust, and like a lot of companies would put a brave face forward and you wouldn't know what was going on. And the first company that I ever worked for that was really transparent and would like have open books and anyone could look at what was going on, they did that when they first had like a downturn and people started being laid off. And part of what they did was like they had to give everyone pay decreases, and they said, going forward, we're going to be transparent. Everyone's going to know what's going on, when it's going on. We're going to tell everyone everything. And I came in at that time at that company, and I've loved transparency ever since. Like that everyone in that company got something out of it. Everyone in that company was there. Like I was one of the few people hired after that point. Like most of the people at that company are still at that company. And like they were there for the bad parts, and knowing that they could just go and see everything, they always were secure. People generally didn't, but they knew they could. That was huge. So I think transparency and just kind of knowing not just the books, but what's going on in everyone's minds and having open, honest conversations. I love that. I personally, like, as someone who works for myself right now, if I ever take a job for another company, it's going to have to be one that is transparent and doesn't just hide stuff away. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be trying to dig through, like, stuff I can find and be nosy.
Yeah, Carolyn, do you see the same thing with buffer with that kind of thing? Is it like so? I feel Diana's passion, and I get that. I just don't know if it's critical to share things like bank balances. Like, I don't know if my team is going to do better if I say, hey, Basecamp has $50 million in the bank or whatever.
Yeah, so to your point of I don't know that I really care. Like, I'm happy to see it, but I don't really care. I would say that's true for a huge majority of the company. Um, People are generally interested in, are we profitable and do we have enough money to do what we want to do, which are the exact two things that you mentioned. Chase, you said we're profitable and we have enough money to do what we want to do. That's like all that matters. Like, okay, company's doing well, my job is secure, and I can hire people if I need them. Great. If I need a new tool or need somebody to do this culture thing that I think is important for the company, like, great. You're so right. 9 times out of 10, that's all that matters. I do think like I could not tell you what the bank balance is right now, despite the fact that we publish it. Like, I do not take the brain space to memorize that number. I do think there is value in the habit of being transparent. The value of, I would say, sharing the minutia and things like that is because it gets you in the habit of sharing. And that's the difference between like transparency as a concept and our value of defaulting to transparency. And the reason that that's, I think, a significant difference is because that does take energy to even remember to go, oh, we should share this somehow, some way. And that takes, resources to have somebody write it on the blog and edit it and, all the things that go into being transparent. Like, being transparent is not free. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes mind space. And so there is value if that's something that you're building a company around and that you do see value in as a value. Or as a sort of company value that everybody agrees to, then I think the nice thing about those little details is just putting your money where your mouth is and building the habit of sharing.
Jeff, let's bring you in on this. So when you were lead of the customer team there at Wistia, what was your stance? Like, what, again, Carolyn mentioned, mileage may vary, all that kind of thing, but where was that line in the sand for you about this is what I will share and these are things that I won't share?
That is a wavy line. I think it's an interesting conversation because a lot of it depends more on your team, I think, than on you as a person. I think if asked, there isn't much that I wouldn't share that I know. It just depends on how I would wrap it, right? So right now, like, to Carolyn's point, like, there have been examples where we've had a teammate struggling, and if somebody came to me and was like, hey, I think this person is struggling, like, what do you think? I'm not going to say, no, they're great, right? Like, I think that's doing everyone a disservice. I think the better thing is to say, yeah, you know what, I really do think that they could use a win. And if you've got something on your list that you think would help them out or you think you have feedback that would make them better, I think you should do that. I don't go into a meeting and open it with, so we all know that this person is really struggling, right? So yeah, I have a problem getting any more specific than that because there's just so many variables in the one thing that I think we could get into a little bit more that I didn't anticipate talking about or it didn't even occur to me is like I guess the concept of disagree and commit is kind of an interesting one in terms of transparency. So if you are in you're in a conversation and you make a decision about the direction you're going to go in or a project that you're about to take on, and then you go into the next room with your team and you're like, I think this is a horrible idea, but this is what we have to do, so let's just like grin and bear it. I don't think that's a good move, like for me personally, in my experience. I think that if you're going to disagree, you have to do it in the previous room, right? And if you just get the instructions by email, they're like, here's what we're going to do, and you disagree with them, you have to go and you have to say, I don't agree. And you have to get to a point where you say, I disagree, but I'll commit to doing it, or this is the wrong thing to do, and I will not like move forward on it. Those are your options there, because otherwise you're kind of like, or my fear, I guess, the reason why I don't do it is that I feel like I would be dumping on the team like a lack of motivation, right? Like they look bad in their jobs, even though the real, like the root cause of that was actually me putting in their heads that this is a bad idea. So I think that that's very interesting. That's a part of the conversation I had not thought about before we got in here, but yeah, that's just like my gut take on that. Everything else that everyone else has said sounds perfect.
Yeah, I think that's one of those where personnel, it's always kind of easy with, not easy, but easier, I guess is a good way of putting it with these kind of sharing issues. If somebody comes to you and says, I have a problem with XYZ, please don't share it, then you're probably not, as a manager, going to start your next conversation with another person as, oh, by the way, guess what so-and-so just told me. Like, we're all professionals. We don't do that kind of thing. It's not high school gossip girls anymore. So I think the personnel thing is a little bit easier. But yeah, the decisions is a little bit tougher. We talked about this a couple of episodes ago about how to deal with decisions that you might not agree with, but you have to implement. So I'll find that and put it in the show notes for everybody. But
Chase,
I don't think. Yeah, go
Chase,
ahead.
one thing I would say is that there actually was a time I think where I was so I had so little time to digest things as a manager that I would just default to being 100% let me give you the brain dump, transparent about things. Not to the point of like disparaging someone in the room, but maybe to the point of saying like that this decision hinged on the fact that this person really needs a win,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that is something that you have to learn. Like from the outside, you're like, that is ridiculous. Like, how could that ever happen? But when you're in, well, maybe if you're someone like me and you have to work through it or you have to talk your way through it, there are plenty of times that you find yourself including context that has like no relevance to the conversation that you're having because you just don't have anywhere else to work through that. So I think I would just add that as kind of a caveat to what you said before. For anyone who's brand new to it and they're like, I can't find that spot where I'm supposed to start talking and where I'm not supposed to talk about it. That it just, for me at least, took a really long time to figure that out.
Yeah, I think every new manager goes through that. I remember back with the first restaurant that I had. It was really hard to figure out, one, who to talk to. You tend to keep. I tried to, as a brand new manager, I tried to keep it, with other managers on the team, the GM, the owner, that kind of thing. But there are some times where either they weren't available or they didn't quite understand. Like maybe you weren't on the same page with them, so you just needed to reach out to somebody else for some advice and that kind of thing. And like Jeff mentioned, at that point it's hard, especially as a new manager, because you don't know what context somebody needs to help you make a better decision, and you don't know what context can be left out, and that might not really be relevant to that. So, yeah, as a new manager, it's tough, and that's not something that even there. I don't even think there's like a wavy line in the sand there. It's just you've got to learn it, like Jeff mentioned. You've got to kind of grow into it. So yeah, if we had an hour for the show, I might dig into that a little bit more. We'll just have to put that one in the back burner because I am interested in that disagreement that we touched on so far. So, Carolyn, let's start with you on that. Buffer is radically transparent. What happens when, Joel or whoever comes in and says, this is what we're going to go with, and you don't agree with that decision? What do you tell your team at that point? Like, do you tell them that you weren't on board with it?
Ooh, I want to know about this.
Yeah, this is kind of a common situation because I remember, and this is not just SaaS either. When we were at restaurants before and we were told, hey, this item over here, this sandwich or whatever has higher profit margin, start pushing that. And even if the customer doesn't really want that kind of thing, it sounds dumb, like, oh yeah, push like a roast beef sandwich, even if the customer doesn't want a roast beef sandwich. Well, it's the same thing. Comcast, you call them and they're always trying to upsell you and all, and it just feels weird. So if you don't, if your CEO says, hey, start pushing higher plans, and you don't really agree with that, what do you tell your team?
So I'll start by saying I'm very lucky in that very rarely happens. I am in an incredibly fortunate, very lucky place where we're just in an environment that encourages listening, and certainly Joel never comes to me and says like, I mean, never. Um, however, of course, there are many conversations where he says like, here's something we're thinking of, would love your advice, what are your thoughts? And I express my thoughts, or we have a bigger conversation as a bigger group, not necessarily just the two of us. And I get overruled, and we end up trying the thing that I was not. And usually it's not the whole concept, usually it's a piece of the concept. So usually I'm not saying, no, we shouldn't do any of this. It's usually like, okay, this is a great idea. I agree that it seems like we should try it. Here's a timeline change that I would suggest, or a scope change or something like that. And I do get overruled a fair amount, which I'm totally fine with, because as you say, I speak up in the meeting. Just to quickly interrupt myself, I don't think that Diana was saying that she doesn't speak up in the first meeting. I felt like she was kind of saying like, well, she speaks up in the first meeting, but then sometimes the decision is made anyway. So just to kind of add that.
Yeah, just that's what I got. So that is the right thing, right? Okay, cool.
Cool.
Yeah, and the comment wasn't meant to say that she doesn't. I just think it's critical to do it and to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't think you were correcting her. I just wanted to clarify it, because I think it did. Yeah, it could have gone either way. So I will usually be quite honest with my team in the sense that there are going to be challenges, and I would rather talk about them openly. It does change though when you say like, here's why it works. Like if you give them full context, usually, I mean, people generally come to similar conclusions when they have all of the same information. So instead of just saying like, it's interesting because when Diana said like, it's bad because you can tell when the manager is lying. Like I think it's even worse when you can't, because then like, what if you find out later that like that person really didn't support that idea at all, but he or she was all gung-ho about it? Like that to me is even worse. So I would rather be really honest with my team and say, here's the things that I brought up. Here were the reasons why we felt like that was a risk that we were willing to take as a company. Here are some of the reasons we're excited about making this decision. Here's some of the things we're looking forward to. And at that point say like, and as with all things, like this is an experiment. So even though I feel a bit nervous about points, 2F and E, maybe we can do it for X amount of time, and we set a timeline for when it feels good to review it. And there is always the opportunity to give feedback earlier than that, and to give strong feedback when our timeline, when we've agreed to the point at which we will share some feelings. And at any point, if anything is like so wrong, then anyone can stop the presses and say like, wait, I really want to stop and talk about this as a company. And anyone has access to anyone in the company to do that. So yeah, I mean, TLDR, just trying to give, just not necessarily just bringing down the decision, but also the reasoning behind the decision, I think goes a really long way.
Yeah, and one of the things there that I kept noticing was always you kept going, this is what we think, this is where we are, this is where we want to be. So the emphasis there on the we rather than the, well, yeah, I disagree with this, and so thinks about this. It's what we as a leadership team have come to, and that kind of thing. So Diana, do you think that's kind of one of the big parts here? Is it's the focus on, a focus on we as a leadership team rather than me as a manager?
Yeah. I mean, to go back to what Jeff said with the whole disagree and commit, that doesn't mean that, like, I think as transparency you have to keep disagreeing. There's definitely a commit to it. I mean, you don't immediately go in and tell your team, like, I disagree with this and this is horrible. I think that you go in and you talk about it, like, this is what's going to happen, this is why, exactly what Carolyn said. To me, like, the main transparency is, let's say a member of your team comes to you in private a day later and says, I'm really worried about this, this, and this. I think that I personally would be really transparent and say, like, I had the exact same worries. I have the exact same worries. this is what we as a leadership team talked about. These are the points that were brought up. This is what we're going to try. The parts that like I really strongly feel you have to be transparent about is you don't just smile and say it's going to be fine. This is the decision that was made. I would bring up as a manager, I had these same worries. I have these same worries, but I'm committed to seeing this through and seeing this experiment through and everything else. I mean, you can put a positive spin on it, but you can't just kind of commit and grin and hide and be super gung ho. I really like. I think especially for me to be a good manager and to have good managers is to have that kind of open, honest conversation. Everything's not perfect. Everything's not wonderful. You can say, I don't, love and agree with everything that's going on. I have my concerns about this, but this is what I'm doing about it. These are the conversations that I had with the other managers or with the leadership team. These are the things that I brought up. This is what they brought up, and this is what, they felt was the right reasons. And, generally, I personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but I personally am kind of known for arguing on leadership teams. Like, generally, if I disagree with something, they know that I disagree with it. I bring up everything and anything, and if, something's been committed to, I'll commit to it with everything, but they know what I've disagreed with. And I can generally come to my team and say, I brought up this, this, and this. We're going ahead with it. And my team knows that I brought up every little point, and if there's something that I disagreed with, they at least know that not only am I going to tell them what I disagreed with, but that everyone else knows about it, and that I didn't, hold my mouth and not say anything, which is why when Carolyn mentioned that, I'm like, oh yeah, don't worry, I brought that up, but that's like that, with the whole disagree and commit, that's why I kind of feel like it's a transparency thing. To me, it's not like immediately screaming at my team, no, I don't agree with this. It's just being open as to if they have concerns, I want them to know that I'm listening to their concerns and that I had concerns too, and that these were brought up and these were discussed, and that to me is where the transparency is. Everyone needs to know that concerns were discussed, that I had concerns, that I'm not just kind of happily sitting there like, it's fine, don't worry about it.
Jeff, is that kind of how you treat the disagree and commit as well when it comes to Wistia decisions?
Yes.
Which, by the way, I don't know
Yes.
if disagree and commit is a phrase, but I feel like it is now. So.
Yeah, I never heard that before. I like it.
Oh yeah, no, I stole that. That's definitely not me.
No, it's one. I used it, I don't know, 17 years ago when I worked at Intel, so.
There you go.
Dang, I really thought like Jeff was onto a new something trademark there. But yeah, so yeah, anyways, is that how it plays out with Wistia?
Yes. Yes, I think so.
No, so that's all we get. Okay. That's your thumbs up plus one to everything else that everyone else said, so we're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
I love easy show topics like this. Thanks. It's fun.
Anything for you, Chase.
All right, cool. So, since we are bumping up against the time slot here, anything else that y'all want to throw in as far as what kind of things that new managers need to be thinking about when it comes to sharing with the team? Last call. Everyone's headed home after this.
Tell your team when you don't know. Be transparent about that too. It's fine to be transparent about weaknesses. I wish someone had told me that, like in my first 2 or 3 management jobs. It took me a while to learn that one. You don't always have to know everything, and it's perfectly fine to tell your team that you don't know. And then you can also tell your team to go find out for you. Delegating is also good, but that's a different topic.
That would be a good show.
Yeah, for me it's so when I get anxious around work stuff, it's always because I don't have context. And so as a new manager, if you're able to give me context, then that goes a long way. So I think that's, if you're sitting there going, is this something I should share with my team? Kind of step back and go, is it going to provide context for something, or is it going to just be like useless not gossip per se, but useless like knowledge that nobody can really do anything with. A good example, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, when somebody leaves your team, when a group of people leaves your team or whatever, if you can give context to that situation, that's a good use of being transparent there. That's going to go a long way with your team. Some stuff, you can be transparent about all day long, and it might matter, it might not. It's just, like earlier with the how much money Buffer has. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're fine. It's good at the end of the day. So yeah, that's what we think on this show. Let us know how transparent you are with your teams. Hit us up. You can head over to supportops.c. This is the lack of sleep again. I promise I'm going to get my act together for the next episode. Head over to supportops.co, click on that red message beacon at the bottom, or hit us up on Twitter. We're at supportops there. Yeah, so that brings us to my favorite part of each and every week. It's this week's shout-outs. These are the things that we think you should know about. They're just that cool. So, Carolyn, since you've been away for so long, oh, wait, what's your joke? Let's just go ahead and get that over with.
I don't have one. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank God.
You take that back. I'm gonna have to take it next week now.
That'd be great. Well, we'll start the show and end the show with a joke. It'd be great. Okay. So, what's your shout out?
So I had a different shout out, but I'm changing it based on something that Diana said. So one thing that just is ringing in my brain is Diana saying, "I'm known for arguing on leadership teams," and so I would have said the same thing about myself. I think I play devil's advocate. I think I think through things in a different way than other people on the leadership team at Buffer. And I had a really interesting conversation with Courtney, who is on she is our inclusivity champion at Buffer, working on sort of diversity of all forms in every way. And we are very diverse in some ways and not diverse in others. So we were just chatting about this, and she sent me this incredible article that is titled, "For Every Yes Man at Work, There's a No Woman." And this has been a conversation that had never spoken so loudly to me until recently. But the fact is that that role of being the one to say, wait, let's think through this, let's talk about this, according to this article and from my own experience, I can say is traditionally a woman on the team. And that is a really hard role. And it is also, it's tough on your career. It's tough on how you're viewed at work. It's tough on your friendships. It's tough on your social clout. And so that's just super relevant to me right now. And I encourage everyone to read it, and I'll send it to Chase for the show notes. And I should also tweet it. So I'll do both of those things.
Diana, what's your shout out for this week?
I'll give a +1 to that article. I read that same article, and it was a little bit of like a, whoa, yeah, exactly. It was a little bit of a mind-blowing one, like, wow, yeah, it's so true. I still think I'm a bit of like the arguer at work, but yeah, I kind of played into like a gender trope there. So my shout out is last few months I've basically been on vacation. So I shout out to vacations everywhere. If no one has taken one, take one soon. And if you are taking one, watch the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. The name makes it sound horrible, but it's actually really good, really funny, and weirdly empowering. It shouldn't be. It really, really shouldn't be, but it kind of is. And it has music. So if you don't like music, don't watch it. And I have nothing career adding to that because I've been on vacation for like 3 months now.
Atta girl.
Jeff, what's your shout out?
I do not know how to follow that. I have an article. It's very long. It's the transcript of a talk from 1986 by Richard Hamming. Hamming was a fairly famous computer scientist who figured out all kinds of stuff that we now take for granted. And Sam Altman posted it a few weeks back, and it took me several weeks to get through. But the title of the talk was "You and Your Research," and it's all about how to become a great scientist. I do not think all of the recommendations in here are things you should do. For example, he mentions that his home life was not super strong. But I do think it's really interesting to break down the ones that you find interesting versus the ones that you would take issue with and think through that. That I find to be a very useful conversation to have with yourself. So I will send that link along, but I highly recommend it.
This is like the most diverse group of shout-outs we've had in a long time. It's fun. Yeah, so Carolyn, here's your joke. I realized I got one from my niece the other day, so I'm going to throw it in here. What did the grape do when he got stepped on?
Wait.
What did the grape do when he got stepped on?
Did he
won?
whine about it?
He let out a little whine. Oh, 2 jokes next week. That's price of admission for the show. There you go. Shout out for me this week, Roku. I'm late to the bandwagon on all this. I'm sure I'll get yelled at or whatever by those people that love Apple TV and everything else. But yeah, so I was on the Chromecast bandwagon for a while, and then it just got so disappointing because my iPad or Mac would disconnect from the Chromecast, and the Chromecast would still be running. So, like, you know, if the kid's waking up or whatever, I'm frantically hitting the pause button on the Chromecast on like my iPad, and it's not working because they're just not talking anymore. So that was incredibly frustrating. Roku had a sale right after Christmas, and I picked one up, like a Roku 3, I think it is. Like little stuff. It saddens me, first off, that the remote still has a radio button on it, and they're no longer in business. So sad shout out for that. But on a plus note, their remote has like a little headphone plug-in thing. So like if the kid's sleeping across the room, then I can like plug my headphones in and everything is fine. Thought that was really neat and really handy. So yeah, check out a Roku or whatever. I'm sure everyone has their own personal like. You have to buy like an Apple TV or Roku or whatever it is. So for me, it's a Roku.
And you can reprogram the audio button.
Oh, you can? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
it takes a little bit of hackiness, but you can.
I might need to do that because every time I hit it accidentally, it's right below the Netflix button. I hit it and Roku's like, "Oh, sad face. They're not in business anymore." So, all right, we'll have that and all the other show notes up shortly at supportops.co. Dan, thanks for being on the show. It's always great to have you here, and then it's also great to have Carolyn back. Jeff, you're just great to have every week. You're constant. You're my constant, like in Lost. It's fantastic. So we'll be back next week with another topic, and yeah, until we see you then, have an awesome week.